let's go ahead and dive into some game previews. And we'll start with what is in some ways arguably the least interesting piece, but maybe has, or the least interesting game, in my opinion, but maybe has the biggest brands, and that is Georgia Clemson. It's funny, even when me and JD Piquel were talking about this game the other day, we didn't spend a lot of time on it because compared to some of the others that we'll talk about, there seems to be a lot less intrigue. I still think Clemson is a lot better than a lot of people are saying. Like, their defense especially is awesome. Barrett Carter's incredible. I think the offense has questions, but like in an ACC where we just saw FSU do what they did, Clemson is right behind Miami still as the favorite to win the conference. The problem is Georgia is an island unto itself when you're talking about how complete the roster is, the lack of weakness. I mean, not that anybody needed to be told this, but in the Pro Football Focus write-up on the Georgia preview, everybody has their biggest strength. And I've never seen this. They said Georgia's biggest strength is just a lack of weaknesses, that there is no actual weakness, right? Like they don't highlight Carson Beck. They don't highlight Mikhail. Well, no, it's a lack of weaknesses. So, at the end of the day, while there will be some interesting conclusions that we could draw about Dabo and maybe how far away is Clemson now from the heights that they used to once occupy, I feel pretty solid in the read that UGA will win this game pretty handily.
There's a couple things that I want to look at. First thing is this Georgia offensive line, which is, I've said it on the show because it's been said to me from multiple sources and even talking like the Carson before the spring game about how good this offensive line is. They feel like this could be a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. And I do think this is a Clemson defensive line that is really darn good. They lost a couple guys last year, but they also, I think, had one, if not two, freshman All-Americans. Peter Woods is pretty damn good. TJ Parker's really damn good. And Clemson has just recruited and has had studs at the defensive line for a long damn time. Like that is an area that Dabo has been really consistent with, of getting first-round NFL talent at the defensive line position. So how truly good is Georgia's offensive line? This is going to be one of their biggest tests of the season. This Clemson line is going to be legit. And then the flip it onto the other side of the football, and this goes for both teams right here. How much more improved is Cade Klubnik as a passer?
Yep.
How much has Garrett Riley been able to implement this offseason compared to a year ago?
Man, talk about a guy that we never talk about, that we used to talk about all last offseason. It was like, Garrett Riley, oh man, Dabo making the move to Garrett Riley. He's showing that he's growing, and look what Garrett Riley just did with TCU.
But it was less of Garrett. It was less of Garrett, though. I think it was more of he was handcuffed based on, I would say, lack of big-time performance from Cade Klubnik. You can only do what you can do with the quarterback you got.
That's fair. I'm just saying that, like, that's a name that we talked about constantly.
Oh, yeah.
That due to poor performance, just I haven't thought about all offseason until it was like yesterday or 2 days ago. And I was like, oh, shit. That's right. Garrett Riley.
And don't forget, Georgia fans are pointing to the fact that last time that he played Georgia's defense, they lost 65-7 in the national championship game when he was at TCU. So maybe Georgia's going to figure it out.
Okay, guys, I would love to see what Georgia's coaching staff would do if you flip the rosters. Like, come on. I'm not saying to be 65-7, but come on, stop it with that. But at
the end of the day, which offense is better? TCU's with a number one draft pick receiver on the outside. I believe they had a really talented running back, a Heisman contending quarterback versus this Clemson offense. Like just compare the two. Which offense would you take? TCU's 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whatever, 2 years ago?
I would say you take TCU's, but still you could argue that, like, on a man-to-man. Yeah, but also isn't that Georgia defense way better 2 years ago maybe than this one? Is this one still really good?
We don't know. I'm just saying though, like, I'm not comparing rosters. I'm just saying like what TCU had offensively to what Clemson we are projecting them have offensively.
TCU high highs, but on a man-to-man basis, like, they didn't have the size that Clemson did, the power, the speed. I don't know, man. That entire TCU team for me though, they've all kind of lost their shine, dude. Everybody sucks in the NFL.
True.
Everybody's a bust. I think the running back is actually the only one that, like, has been any good in the league. Everybody else has completely disappeared. Even Garrett Riley disappeared. We told you at the time The worry is that this was the exception, not the rule for Sonny Dykes. So, no, Georgia fans, do not draw any conclusions from what happened in the TCU game 2 years ago.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
irrelevant.
But going back to the offense, though, Cade has to be in one area that Cade can excel, one area that can give Georgia fits. And if you go back to the past couple of years, the type of quarterback that has given Georgia fits, go back to even like CJ Stroud. The reason why I thought CJ should have been the first pick in the NFL draft was the performance that he had versus Georgia, not just throwing the football, but extending plays. You remember, I was like, damn, like I didn't know CJ could run like that. I didn't know CJ could throw on the run like that. And it really gave Georgia's defense fits. Where is Georgia young this year? They're really young in the secondary. They're very young. They got Malachi Starks, but they lost 3 NFL DBs. So they're going to be breaking in some new guys. So if Cade is able to extend plays, if Cade's able to get outside the pocket, if he's able to slow down the pass rush because they're worried about him moving around a little bit, similar to what we saw in the game the other day. Florida State had the elite defensive line. That's what we all thought. And then you put a running quarterback in there that's moving around, that's actually running the football, and that D-line disappeared. If Cade can do a little bit of that, extend the play, and really test the youth of Georgia's secondary, they can maybe create some plays down the field. I'm saying that is what's going to need to happen. Cade sitting back, taking drops, and throwing an NFL system and thinking that they're going to win that way is not going to happen.
Well, and the problem is for me that if you're telling me the best way to exploit a Kirby Smart-led team is with the very position group and the part of the game that Kirby Smart has cut his teeth on and come up doing, I knowing the talent that he has, I find that a bit hard to get behind. Dobby says this game's going to be great. Not sure why you're talking it down. Maybe SEC bias. Look, I would love if it was like the JT Daniels Uyunglele game of a few years ago where it was tight the entire time and a close run affair. But I think that Georgia has evolved so much offensively since that moment. And I think the difference between a JT Daniels starting and Carson Beck is massive. I think that the difference between Carson Beck in year 1 to Carson Beck year 2 could be potentially massive. And there's
a big gap. There's a big gap between the quarterbacks in this game.
A massive gap. And that makes a very big difference. And the problem is, even though if you wanted to argue, you could argue Clemson's defense is better, but even then it wouldn't be a massive gap. It'd be an argument. And so Georgia's strength on weakness is so much stronger than Clemson's strength on weakness that while I still think Clemson is very good, that's why, Dobby, I don't think this is going to be a very good game. I mean, and it's not just me. Now, I don't want to lean too hard on spreads here because it's week 0 and we've already seen an 11.5 point spread go out the window, and you can never know how like coaching changes and other things affect it, but like it's a 13.5 point spread in Clemson, Georgia, in which odds makers are going to be a bit more conservative anyway because they are such major brands and it's the first year of the season. So like it could be even higher if this was later in the year potentially. So I could be way wrong. Unfortunately, I think Clemson maybe comes up with like a couple of stops, but Georgia wears them down over time. And the pro style kind of system that Georgia runs, if you're talented enough to execute it, which they are, it is one that is very good at dealing with great defenses.
Yep, 100%. Who's it? A-Barge in the chat said, UJ still has good corners. No doubt about it. All very, very good corners. Can't they just stack the box? I think they will early. I think this is going to be a game in which Georgia says, Cade Klubnik, you have to win it with your arm. And we need to see how good these Clemson receivers are because Clemson receivers have been very, very similar to Alabama, very average over the past 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Very, very average. And that's an area we talk about the defensive line for the way Dabo built this football team was elite playmakers on the outside, great defensive alignment, and then obviously really good quarterback play too. And it seems like they've lost the quarterback play for the past couple of years. They whiffed on DJ, possible whiff on Cade, haven't had elite receivers. So they've really missed on the offensive side for the skill in a big way. And that has kind of been the downfall of Clemson over the past couple of years. But what I'm looking for from Clemson overall is maybe not them winning this game, because I think we all agree, most of us agree that Georgia's the better football team. but the ACC seems like it's pretty open right now.
Mhm.
Can you be
Yeah.
competitive on defense, and can you be the elite defense we think you are?
Clemson will
And can it
absolutely be good enough to threaten for ACC championship.
100%. But if Cade looks improved, then all of a sudden, I think we walk away from this weekend saying that you lost to Georgia. It's okay, but you look like the best team in the ACC. I just want to see Cade Klubnik as an improved quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, yes, that's a good point in terms of takeaways that you could have in this game that maybe wouldn't be dependent on the result, but you could carry forward. Like, yeah, if Cade looks frisky and
Yeah.
Clemson plays him tough, then maybe you emerge out of this and you say, no, I think they're actually the favorite in the ACC,
Yep.
even over Miami.
100%.
AK says, I think what also gives Clemson the edge is the fact that they're being slept on. If UJ goes in there sleeping on them like everyone else is, it's going to be a long game. Again, maybe I'm just too much of kind of a Kirby fanboy from afar. But if there's one guy that I know that can get his team to lock in and not take a team for granted, I would argue that it's Kirby Smart. So
it's still
maybe I'm
Clemson,
wrong.
but it's let's be honest. Clemson is still a major brand.
Also a good point. Yes.
Major brand with a tier 2 coach that has won championships and a bunch of 4 and 5-star guys. Like, that is still a talented ass roster, and that is one of the biggest brands in college football currently today. And it's the first game of the season. I don't think there's any chance of Georgia overlooking Clemson. It's a really good football team.
Ben Collins says, what does this game do to the Dabo narrative? He's already kicked callers off his radio show. If you missed that, yeah, Tyler from Spartanburg has officially ended all callers in the Dabo show. If they lose, does his seat get hot? So this is maybe an interesting piece of this game. I think Clemson is kind of playing with house money here, Aaron. You know, nobody expects him to win. Everybody knows that their path to the playoff probably lies to an ACC championship either way. So this game is kind of irrelevant to their hopes as a whole. If I was a Clemson fan, I would definitely want to win.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't feel completely dejected if it didn't happen. I'd be like, you know what? Fuck it. It's Georgia. Pick ourselves back up. Let's lock in for ACC play. We'll be good. We'll be just fine.
Let me go back real quick. Georgia played Oregon 2 years ago in the same game. You remember that? And they beat the living breaks out of them. Just beat them to death.
30-3.
Oregon, I think, ended up going 10-2.
I think they lost to Washington.
So they won that. Georgia won 49-3. Oregon in 2022 ended up going 9-3.
They lost to Washington and USC.
No, Washington and Oregon State.
Shit.
Both by 3 points. They lost to Washington 37-34. They lost to Oregon State 38-34. So once again, like, they were, probably a couple plays away from being what in today's world a playoff caliber team, that year. Or they were a playoff caliber team. They were a play away from probably being in a 12-team playoff. So not over if you lose.
No. And again, it's the best team in the country, guys.
Yeah.
It should come as no surprise that we're choosing the best team in the country and the one that has been the best the last few years to win the game.
Yeah.
That's why they're the best team in the country. So clearly I'm picking Georgia here. What about you, Rick?
Picking Georgia.